The sharp click of polished Oxfords against the terminal floor created a rhythm that matched his heartbeat steady, unhurried. William Washington moved through the bustling terminal of O'Hare International Airport with the measured pace of someone accustomed to navigating spaces with intention. At 57, his salt and pepper hair and tailored charcoal suit spoke of his position as Chief Justice of the Illinois State Supreme Court, though today he was simply a man catching a flight to his daughter's graduation. He carried a worn leather briefcase, a gift from his father when William had passed the bar 30 years ago. Inside, a dog-eared copy of his daughter Zora's latest published paper on quantum entanglement, a congratulatory card he'd spent an hour selecting, and the pocket watch that had belonged to his grandfather, a man who had cleaned courtrooms but never been permitted to speak in one. The security line parted almost imperceptibly as he approached, not from recognition but from the quiet authority he carried without effort. William had long ago mastered the art of presence of occupying space in a world that often suggested he take up less of it. "Shoes and belt in the bin, please," the TSA agent said without looking up. William complied, placing his items in the gray plastic container. As he stepped through the scanner, he noticed the agent's eyes widen slightly in recognition not of his face, but of the contrast between his appearance and his belongings. The Rolex watch, the Mont Blanc pen, the hand-stitched Italian shoes. The momentary calculation behind the agent's eyes was familiar to William, the silent reconciliation of prejudice with evidence. "Have a good flight, sir," the agent said, his tone shifting to something more deferential. William nodded and continued toward his gate. He had 40 minutes before boarding, enough time to call Zora and confirm his arrival time. "Dad?" Her voice came through clear and excited. "Are you at the airport?" "Just cleared security," he replied, smiling at the sound of her voice. "How are the pre-graduation jitters?" "Manageable. Professor Higgs wants to introduce you to the department chair tomorrow. Apparently, they're fans of your ruling on the Westlake environmental case. The one where I cited quantum uncertainty as a legal principle for environmental protection standards." "That's the one. You're like a rock star in the physics department, Dad." William chuckled. "A rock star who still needs you to explain half the concepts in your thesis. You understand more than you think. Oh, Mom just texted. Her flight gets in an hour after yours. Can you wait at the terminal?" "Of course," William said, thinking of his ex-wife Diane. Their divorce had been amicable, their respect for each other intact, even as their marriage had dissolved under the pressure of too demanding careers and too many nights in empty houses. "I'll grab her, and we'll head straight to your apartment." "Perfect. Love you, Dad." "Love you too, Zora. See you soon." As he ended the call, William found an empty seat near his gate. He pulled out Zora's paper, attempting once more to grasp the complexities of quantum entanglement that his daughter navigated with such ease. The concepts were challenging, but he persisted, making notes in the margins with his fountain pen. This was their ritual, she would write, he would read, and together they would bridge the gap between their intellectual worlds. A young man in a Harvard sweatshirt sat down across from him, glancing curiously at the complex equations on the page. William offered a small smile, which the young man returned before opening his laptop. There was a moment of recognition between them, not of faces, but of experience. The young man's shoulders carried the same subtle tension that William had worn at his age, the awareness of being simultaneously visible and invisible in spaces not designed with you in mind. The boarding announcement for Flight 2237 to Boston crackled over the loudspeaker. William gathered his belongings and joined the line, boarding pass ready on his phone. He watched as first class and priority passengers were called, then Zone 1, where his seat assignment placed him. Boarding pass QR code scanned, William made his way down the jet bridge to the waiting aircraft. Flight 2237 to Boston was nearly full when he stepped aboard, nodding politely to the flight attendant, who barely glanced up from her tablet. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice carrying the warm bass tones that had commanded courtrooms for decades. "Seat?" asked Bradley Whitfield, a young white man with cropped blonde hair and a freshly pressed uniform that suggested this might be one of his first flights as lead cabin attendant. "2A," William replied, already moving toward the first-class cabin. Bradley's eyes flickered up, a momentary assessment that lasted a fraction too long. "Sir, I believe there may be a mistake. First class has already boarded." William paused, his expression unchanged. "My boarding pass indicates seat 2A, he said, extending the digital pass on his phone. Bradley glanced at the screen, then back at William. "Let me just double-check something," he said, tapping rapidly on his tablet. "It seems there's been a system error. We've had to reassign some seats due to weight distribution. I'll need to move you to 23C in economy." The cabin had grown quieter. A white businessman in 1C looked up from his laptop, then quickly backed down. A woman in 2B, the seat beside William's assigned spot, shifted uncomfortably, her designer handbag clutched a little tighter. William stood perfectly still. He had encountered this particular system error before in restaurants, in stores, in countless small moments throughout his life. His daughter Zora had a term for it: algorithmic bias of the humankind. "I see," he said, his voice maintaining its measured tone. "May I see the manifest that shows this reassignment?" Bradley's confidence faltered. "It's an internal system notation, sir. I don't have access to print that for passengers." "I understand," William said. "Then perhaps you could show me which other passengers have been reassigned due to this weight distribution issue." The silence in the first-class cabin deepened. A flight attendant in the back, Gabriela Suarez, watched the exchange with growing concern, her experienced eyes recognizing the situation unfolding. "Sir, if you could please move to seat 23C, we need to complete boarding," Bradley insisted, his voice rising slightly. William didn't move. "I've paid for seat 2A, and my boarding pass confirms that assignment. Unless you can provide documentation of this reassignment policy being applied to other passengers, I'll be taking my assigned seat." Bradley's face flushed. "Sir, as the cabin manager, I have final authority over seating arrangements. If you continue to be difficult, I'll need to call the captain." "Please do," William replied calmly. The line of passengers behind William had grown, their collective impatience building like a physical presence. A middle-aged white woman sighed audibly. The young man in the Harvard sweatshirt from the gate watched with knowing eyes. An elderly Asian couple whispered to each other in Mandarin. William felt the weight of their gazessum, sympathetic, others annoyed, many simply uncomfortable with the disruption of routine. He had stood before the highest courts in the land, faced down governors and senators, but these moments, these small public negotiations of dignity still, required a particular kind of strength. Bradley spoke into his handheld radio, his voice low but urgent. "Captain Chen, we have a situation in the cabin." William waited, briefcase still in hand, his posture relaxed but unmovable. He thought of his grandfather's pocket watch in his briefcase, of the man who had worn it while sweeping courthouse floors, who had taught William that dignity wasn't given, it was claimed, quietly but firmly, every single day. Gabriela stepped forward. "Bradley, may I speak with you for a moment?" Her 20 years of experience evident in her tone. They stepped aside, speaking in hushed tones. Passengers continued boarding, moving past the scene with curious glances. Do you know who that is? Gabriella whispered. A passenger who needs to follow instructions, Bradley replied defensively. That's Chief Justice Washington of the Illinois Supreme Court, she said. And more importantly, there is no weight distribution issue on this flight. I checked the manifest myself before boarding. Bradley's expression shifted from confidence to confusion. The system flagged. The system flagged nothing, Gabriella interrupted. Check again. Bradley looked down at his tablet, scrolling through the passenger list. His face paled slightly as he realized his mistaker perhaps recognized it had never been a mistake at all. Meanwhile, William stood patiently, his briefcase held in one hand, watching the whispered conference. He had spent a lifetime perfecting the art of waiting in spaces that questioned his presence. In his courtroom, silence was a tool he wielded with precision. Here, in this narrow metal tube, 30,000 feet above prejudice, but never beyond its reach, silence was simply his shield. The businessman in 1C had removed his headphones, suddenly interested in the conversation. The woman in 2B studied her manicure with intense focus. From the cockpit emerged Captain Sarah Chen, a compact woman in her 40s with an air of unquestionable authority. Her eyes took in the scene with the rapid assessment of someone accustomed to making split-second decisions. "What seems to be the problem?" she asked, her voice calm but commanding. Bradley straightened. "Captain, this passenger is insisting on sitting in first class, but there's been a reassignment." "I've reviewed the manifest," Gabriella interjected. "There's no record of any seat reassignment on this flight." Captain Chen's gaze shifted to William, then to his boarding pass still displayed on his phone. "Sir, your assigned seat is 2A. "Yes, Captain," William replied. She nodded once. "Then seat 2A is where you'll sit." She turned to Bradley. "Mr. Whitfield, please assist the remaining passengers with boarding. We're already behind schedule." Bradley's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Yes, Captain." As Captain Chen returned to the cockpit, William finally moved to his seat. As he settled in, he noticed the woman beside him, Diana Kensington, according to the brief glance he caught of her boarding pass shift slightly away. "First time to Boston?" he asked pleasantly. "No," she replied curtly, then after a moment added, "I'm visiting my son at Harvard." "Wonderful school," William said. "My daughter graduates from MIT tomorrow. Engineering physics." Something in Diana's expression changed surprise, recalibration. "That's impressive." "She is," William agreed, then opened his briefcase to retrieve the book on quantum mechanics. "She's been trying to explain her thesis to me for months. I'm still catching up." Diana glanced at the complex equations on the page he opened to. "You understand that?" William smiled. "Parts of it. Enough to know how brilliant my daughter is. Not enough to explain it at a dinner party." A small laugh escaped Diana, seemingly despite herself. "My son is in law, first year. I was hoping to understand more of what he talks about, but it's all Latin phrases and precedents I've never heard of." "The law has its own language," William agreed. "It's designed to be precise, but often ends up being exclusionary." "You sound like you know something about it," Diana said, studying him more carefully now. "A little," William replied, the understatement sitting comfortably between them. The boarding process continued around them, the momentary tension dissipating into the routine of a commercial flight. Bradley moved through the cabin, avoiding eye contact with William as he assisted other passengers. Gabriella appeared with pre-flight drinks, her smile warm as she served them. "Justice Washington," she said quietly, "it's an honor to have you on board. My sister clerked for Justice Rodriguez on the Ninth Circuit." Mariana Suarez? William asked, recognition dawning. She wrote that brilliant brief on indigenous water rights. Gabriella's smile widened. That's her. She'll be thrilled I met you. As Gabriella moved on, Diana turned to William with new interest. Justice Washington? You're a judge? Illinois Supreme Court, he confirmed. I see, Diana said, something shifting in her demeanor. My son would be very impressed. He's particularly interested in constitutional law. A fascinating field, William replied, always evolving, despite those who claim it's set in stone. The plane began to push back from the gate. The safety demonstration played on screens throughout the cabin. William watched as Bradley performed his duties with mechanical precision, his earlier confidence replaced by a stiff professionalism. As the aircraft taxied toward the runway, William thought about the moment that had just passed stone of countless similar moments in his life. Each one a small negotiation of space and respect, each one requiring the same careful calibration of response. Too passive, and dignity was surrendered. Too aggressive, and stereotypes were confirmed. It was an exhausting calculus, one he had mastered out of necessity rather than choice. The engines roared as the plane accelerated down the runway. Beside him, Diana had opened a novel something with a pastel cover and embossed title. William returned to his daughter's paper, the complex mathematics a welcome distraction from the lingering tension in his shoulders. They were 20 minutes into the flight when Bradley appeared with the beverage cart. He served 1A, 1B, and 1C with practiced efficiency, then moved to 2B. Something to drink, ma'am? He asked Diana. White wine, please, she replied. Bradley poured the wine and handed it to her, then paused before addressing William. There was a moment brief but unmistakable where it seemed he might pass by without offering service. And for you, sir? He finally asked, his voice neutral. Sparkling water, thank you, William replied. Bradley poured the water and handed it to William without meeting his eyes. As he moved on to the next row, William took a sip of his drink, the carbonation sharp against his tongue. Diana watched the interaction with newfound awareness. That was uncomfortable, she said quietly. William shrugged slightly. It happens. Often? Often enough to be familiar, rare enough to still notice. Diana considered this. My son talks about systemic bias in his classes. I always thought he was being a bit dramatic, that things had improved. They have, William said. My grandfather couldn't have sat in this seat at all. My father could have, but the flight attendant wouldn't have called him sir. I can sit here and be called sir, but still have my right to the seat questioned. Progress is real, but it's not linear. Diana nodded slowly. I've never had to think about it that way. That's its own kind of privilege, William said, not unkindly. The conversation paused as turbulence rattled the cabin. The seatbelt sign illuminated with a soft ding. Outside the window, clouds obscured the ground below, a temporary white blindness. My son would love to meet you, Diana said when the plane steadied. He's struggling a bit, feels out of place at Harvard. Law school is difficult for everyone, William replied. It's not just the academics. He's the first in our family to go to college. His roommates all have parents who are lawyers or doctors. He feels like he doesn't belong. William nodded. I understand that feeling. When I was at Yale Law, I was one of 12 black students in my class. Most of my classmates had family legacies there. My father was a postal worker. How did you handle it? I found my people, not just other black students, but anyone who understood what it meant to be an outsider. And I remembered what my father told me. They can question whether you belong, but they can't question what you know. Diana smiled. That's good advice. Your son is welcome to email me, William said, reaching into his briefcase for a business card. The first year is the hardest. It gets better. Diana accepted the card, studying the embossed seal of the Illinois Supreme Court. Thank you. That's very kind. The flight continued without further incident. Bradley avoided the first-class cabin when possible, leaving service primarily to Gabriella. As they began their descent into Boston, the captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our approach to Boston Logan International. Local time is 4:45 p.m. with clear skies and a pleasant 72 degrees. We should be at the gate right on schedule. As passengers prepared for landing, Gabriella approached William. Justice Washington, the captain would like to speak with you after we land, if you have a moment. William nodded. Of course. The landing was smooth, the plane touching down with barely a bump before taxiing to the gate. As passengers gathered their belongings, Captain Chen emerged from the cockpit. She approached William directly. Justice Washington, I want to personally apologize for your experience today. This is not representative of our airline's values. Thank you, Captain, William replied. I appreciate that. Mr. Whitfield is relatively new, she continued, glancing toward Bradley, who was assisting other passengers. But that's no excuse. We'll be addressing this internally. Diana Kensington, still gathering her things, paused to listen. Captain, William said thoughtfully, rather than disciplinary action, might I suggest something else? When I train new law clerks, I find education more effective than punishment. Captain Chen raised an eyebrow. What did you have in mind? Your airline has a diversity training program, I assume? We do, though I'll admit it's more perfunctory than effective. William reached into his briefcase and retrieved another business card. I know some people who do excellent work in this area, real training, not just checking boxes. It might be worth your corporate team's time. Captain Chen accepted the card. I'll pass this along, and again, my apologies. As passengers began to deplane, Diana turned to William. That was gracious of you. I'm not sure I would have been so forgiving. It's not about forgiveness, William replied. It's about change. Firing one flight attendant doesn't fix a culture. Education might. Diana nodded, then hesitated. My son, his name is Tyler. If he emails you, you'll respond? I will, William promised. They parted at the gate, Diana heading for ground transportation, William making his way to the arrivals area to wait for his ex-wife's flight. As he walked, his phone buzzed with a text from Zora. Landed yet? Can't wait to see you. He smiled and typed back. Just landed. Waiting for your mom. See you soon. William found a seat near the arrivals board, watching as flights landed and families reunited. His mind drifted back to the incident on the plane. It wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. Each occurrence was both unique and depressingly familiar variations on a theme that had played throughout his life. He remembered his first day at Yale Law School, standing in the library as a security guard asked to see his ID while white students walked past unchallenged. He remembered buying his first house in an affluent Chicago suburb, the realtor suggesting he might be more comfortable in a different neighborhood. He remembered taking his seat on the bench for the first time, a bailiff asking him if he was in the right courtroom. Each time he had responded with the same measured dignity, neither accepting the slight nor allowing it to consume him. It was a balance his father had taught him, a man who had delivered mail to homes he could never afford to buy, who had smiled and nodded at people who never looked him in the eye. You can't control how they see you, his father had told him, but you can control how you see yourself. William checked the arrivals board. Diane's flight from San Francisco was on time due to land in 20 minutes. He pulled out his phone to check his email, finding a message from his clerk about a pending case. He was composing a response when a voice interrupted his thoughts. "Excuse me, Justice Washington?" William looked up to see the young man in the Harvard sweatshirt from the gate. Up close, he was younger than William had initially thought, perhaps 19 or 20. "Yes," William replied. "I'm sorry to bother you, sir. I'm Tyler Kensington. I think you just met my mother on your flight." William smiled in recognition. "Tyler, your mother mentioned you. Please, sit down." Tyler sat, his posture betraying his nervousness. "She texted me about what happened on the plane, and that you offered to talk to me about law school." "I did," William confirmed. "How are you finding Harvard?" Tyler hesitated. "It's challenging. Not just the work, but the environment. I don't come from money like most of my classmates. And I'm one of only a few black students in my section." William nodded. "I understand. Yale was similar when I attended. The legal profession has made progress in diversity, but not as much as we'd like to believe." "How did you deal with it?" Tyler asked. "The feeling that you don't belong." "I reminded myself daily that I earned my place there," William said, "and I found mentors who could guide me through the unwritten rules of the profession." "That's the hard part," Tyler admitted. "The unwritten rules, the networking, the way everyone else seems to know exactly how to talk and act." "It's a language," William agreed, "one that can be learned, but it shouldn't require you to erase who you are in the process." Tyler nodded, his expression thoughtful. "My constitutional law professor mentioned your ruling in Thompson versus Illinois Board of Education last semester, the school funding case." Yes, one of my more controversial opinions." "I thought it was brilliant," Tyler said, his enthusiasm breaking through his reserve. "The way you connected equal protection to educational outcomes, not just resources." William smiled. "Thank you. That case was personal for me. I attended Chicago public schools that were chronically underfunded. I wanted to ensure that the next generation had better opportunities." They continued talking, the conversation flowing easily from legal theory to practical advice about surviving law school. William found himself impressed by Tyler's intellect and passion for justice. The young man reminded him of himself at that age, hungry for knowledge, eager to make a difference, but uncertain of his place in a system not designed for him. "I should let you go," Tyler said eventually, glancing at his watch. "My mom will be waiting." "Before you do," William said, "I have a suggestion. My court offers internships each summer. The application deadline for next year is in February. I'd encourage you to apply." Tyler's eyes widened. "Really? That would be amazing." "It's competitive," William warned. "But based on our conversation, I think you'd be an excellent candidate." "Thank you, Justice Washington. I'll definitely apply." They exchanged contact information, and Tyler left with a renewed confidence in his step. William watched him go, thinking about the strange serendipity of the day, how a moment of prejudice had led to this connection, this opportunity to mentor a promising young mind. His phone buzzed with a notification. Diane's flight had landed. He stood and made his way to the arrivals gate, scanning the crowd for his ex-wife's familiar face. Diane Washington emerged from the security area, pulling a small carry-on suitcase. At 55, she remained as striking as when they'd met in law school, her gray-streaked haircut in a stylish bob, her posture straight and confident. She spotted William and smiled, the warmth in her expression a testament to the friendship they had maintained despite their divorce. "William," she said, embracing him briefly, "how was your flight?" "Eventful," he replied. "I'll tell you in the car." They made their way to the rental car counter, catching up on their respective lives. Diane had recently been named Dean of Stanford Law School, a position she had worked toward for years. William shared news of his recent cases and mutual friends in Chicago. It wasn't until they were in the car, heading toward Cambridge, that William told her about the incident on the plane. "Some things never change," Diane said when he finished, her voice carrying the weariness of someone who had witnessed such moments throughout their life together. "How did you handle it?" "The usual way," William replied. "Calm, firm, and with the knowledge that I had right on my side." Diane smiled. "The William Washington special. You always were better at keeping your cool than I was." "You preferred the direct approach," William agreed, remembering Diane's fiery confrontations with discrimination during their marriage. "We balanced each other that way." "We did," she said softly. "Zora got the best of both of us, your patience and my refusal to back down." They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the Boston skyline visible across the harbor. William thought about their daughter, about the world she was navigating, different from the one he and Diane had faced, but with its own challenges and prejudices. "I met an interesting young man at the airport," William said eventually. "A first-year law student at Harvard. Bright, passionate, but struggling with the culture shock." "Like we were," Diane noted. "Exactly. I suggested he apply for an internship with the court." Diane glanced at him. "Taking on another mentee? You already have a full docket." "This one's special," William said. "Reminds me of myself at that age." "You always were a sucker for potential," Diane said, but her tone was affectionate. "It's one of your better qualities." They arrived at Zora's apartment in Cambridge just as the sun was setting. Their daughter was waiting for them on the steps of her building, her face lighting up as they parked. At 25, Zora Washington was a perfect blend of her parents Diane's sharp features and William's thoughtful eyes, her mother's directness and her father's quiet strength. "Finally," she exclaimed, hugging them both. "I was beginning to think you'd gotten lost." "Your father was making connections at the airport," Diane said with a smile. "As usual." Zora laughed. "Some things never change. Come on in. I've got dinner waiting." The apartment was small but meticulously organized, reflecting Zora's scientific mind. Books on quantum physics lined the shelves, interspersed with framed photos of her with her parents at various stages of her academic journey. The dining table was set for 3, a bottle of champagne chilling in an ice bucket. "We're celebrating early," Zora explained. "Tomorrow will be chaos with the ceremony and the department reception." They sat down to dinner, the conversation flowing easily between them. Zora shared stories from her research, explaining complex concepts in ways that made them accessible even to her parents. William and Diane listened with pride, occasionally exchanging glances that acknowledged the extraordinary young woman they had raised. "So," Zora said, as they finished the main course, "are you going to tell me what happened on your flight, Dad? Mom texted that there was an incident." William sighed. "It was nothing unusual. A flight attendant tried to move me from my first-class seat to economy, claiming a system error." Zora's expression darkened. "The same old story." "The same old story," William agreed, "but with a slightly different ending. The captain intervened, and I ended up meeting the mother of a promising law student." "Always finding the silver lining," Zora said, shaking her head. "I don't know how you do it. I would have raised hell." "Like your mother," William said with a smile. "Damn right," Diane interjected, "and sometimes raising hell is exactly what's needed." "Different approaches for different moments," William said. "There's a time for calm and a time for righteous anger. The trick is knowing which is which." Zora nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. As I move into this next phase of my career, how do I navigate these spaces as a black woman in physics? When do I speak up, and when do I focus on the work? It's a balance, Diane said. One you'll recalibrate throughout your life. And you don't have to face it alone, William added. You have mentors, colleagues, community. And two parents who've been there, Zora said with a smile. I know, I'm lucky that way. They finished dinner and moved to the living room, where Zora brought out a small box. I have something for you both, she said. A thank you gift for everything you've done to get me here. Inside the box were two identical pocket watches, modern versions of the one William carried from his grandfather. I had them engraved, Zora said. William opened his watch to find an inscription. Time moves forward, but justice is timeless. Love, Zora. Diane's bore the same message. Her eyes glistened as she read it. They're beautiful, she said, but you didn't need to. I wanted to, Zora interrupted. Everything I am, everything I've achieved, is because you both showed me what was possible. You taught me to claim my space in the world, even when the world wasn't ready to give it. William felt a swell of emotion as he looked at his daughter, confident, brilliant, unafraid. He thought of his grandfather, who had cleaned courtrooms with his head bowed, of his father, who had delivered mail with dignity but limited dreams, of himself, who had fought for a seat at tables where he wasn't always welcome. And now Zora, preparing to take her place among the world's leading physicists, her horizons limitless. Progress wasn't linear, but it was real, measured in generations, in opportunities seized, in spaces claimed and held. Thank you, he said simply, embracing his daughter. Later that night, after Diane had gone to bed in Zora's spare room, William sat by the window, looking out at the Cambridge skyline. His phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender was Bradley Whitfield, the flight attendant from earlier that day. William hesitated, then opened the message. Justice Washington. I want to apologize for my behavior on today's flight. There was no system error, no weight distribution issue. I made assumptions based on biases I didn't even realize I held. Captain Chen has spoken with me at length, and I understand now how my actions were part of a pattern that you and many others face regularly. I am deeply sorry. I've requested to be enrolled in the airline's new diversity training program, which I understand you helped recommend. I want to do better. Respectfully, Bradley Whitfield. William read the email twice, considering his response. It would have been easy to ignore it, to let the young man sit with his discomfort. But that wasn't who William was, nor was it the example he wanted to set. He began typing. Mr. Whitfield, thank you for your email. Recognizing our biases is the first step toward addressing them. I appreciate your willingness to learn and grow from this experience. The training program is excellent, but the real work happens in daily interactions, in the small moments when we choose to see people as individuals rather than categories. I wish you well in that ongoing journey. Sincerely, William Washington. He sent the email, then closed his phone. Tomorrow, his daughter would graduate. Tomorrow, he would sit proudly in the audience, watching her accept her doctorate. Tomorrow, they would celebrate her achievements and her future. But tonight, in this quiet moment, he thought about the day's events, about Bradley Whitfield and Diana Kensington, about Tyler and his ambitions, about Captain Chen and her immediate recognition of injustice. He thought about the complex web of interactions that made up a society, how each small moment of prejudice or fairness rippled outward in ways impossible to fully measure. His grandfather's pocket watch sat on the table beside him. He opened it, running his thumb over the worn face. the steady tick a reminder of time's passage and the slow march of progress. Beside it lay Zora's gift, the new watch with its hopeful inscription. Time moves forward, but justice is timeless. William closed both watches and prepared for bed, ready for tomorrow and all the tomorrows that would follow, each one an opportunity to bend the arc of the moral universe a little closer toward justice. The morning of Zora's graduation dawned clear and bright, the May sunshine casting Cambridge in a golden glow. William woke early, his judicial habits making it impossible to sleep past 6, even on vacation. He dressed quietly, careful not to wake Diane in the adjacent room, and made his way to the small kitchen to prepare coffee. To his surprise, Zora was already up, sitting at the dining table with her laptop open, a mug of tea steaming beside her. "Couldn't sleep?" William asked, pouring himself a cup from the pot she had already brewed. "Too excited," she admitted, "and nervous. I'm giving a short speech at the department ceremony." "You didn't mention that last night." Zora shrugged. "I didn't want to make a big deal of it. It's just a few minutes, representing the doctoral candidates." "Still," William said, sitting across from her, "it's an honor." "It is," she agreed, "and terrifying. These are some of the brightest minds in physics. What if I say something stupid?" William smiled. "You won't. But even if you did, it wouldn't diminish your accomplishments or your potential." "Always the voice of reason," Zora said, returning his smile. "How do you stay so calm about everything?" "Practice," William replied. "And perspective. Most crises aren't actually crises. Most mistakes aren't fatal. Most challenges are opportunities in disguise." "Like your flight yesterday?" "Exactly like that." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, father and daughter, each contemplating the day ahead. Then Zora said, "I read Bradley Whitfield's email. You left it open on your phone when you plugged it in to charge." William raised an eyebrow. "Snooping, counselor?" "Observing, Your Honor," Zora replied with a grin. "I was curious about what happened after Mom told me about the incident." "And what did you think of his apology?" Zora considered the question. It seemed sincere, but one email doesn't undo a lifetime of bias. "No," William agreed. "It doesn't, but it's a start." "You're more forgiving than I would be." "Not forgiving," William corrected. "Strategic. Change happens one mind at a time, one interaction at a time. Sometimes confrontation is necessary. Sometimes education is more effective." "The William Washington approach to justice," Zora said. "Measured, deliberate, playing the long game." "I learned it from your grandfather," William said. "He used to tell me, 'Son, you can win an argument or you can change a mind. Choose wisely.'" Zora nodded, then turned back to her laptop. "I'm still working on my speech. Want to hear what I have so far?" "I'd be honored." As Zora read her draft, William listened with pride. Her words were clear, her ideas complex but accessible, her passion evident. She had inherited his measured approach, but combined it with Diane's fire, a powerful combination that would serve her well in the competitive world of theoretical physics. "What do you think?" she asked when she finished. "I think MIT is lucky to have had you," William said, "and CERN is even luckier to be getting you." Zora beamed. "Thanks, Dad." Diane emerged from the spare room, dressed but still yawning. "Are you two having profound father-daughter bonding without me?" "Just helping Zora with her speech," William said. "Which means he's sitting there looking wise while I do all the work," Zora added with a laugh. "The William Washington special," Diane said, pouring herself coffee. He used to do the same thing when I was preparing for oral arguments. Just sit there, nodding occasionally, asking one devastatingly insightful question, and somehow making me feel like I'd figured it all out myself. It's a gift, William said modestly. They spent the morning in easy companionship, preparing for the day's ceremonies. William and Diane shared stories of their own graduations, of the hopes and fears they had carried as they embarked on their careers. Zora listened, asking questions, drawing parallels to her own journey. At 11, they left for MIT, joining the stream of families heading toward campus. The air buzzed with excitement and pride, with the particular energy of achievement and possibility that permeated graduation days. The main ceremony was held in Killian Court, the vast lawn framed by MIT's imposing neoclassical buildings. William and Diane found seats among the thousands of parents and guests, their eyes fixed on the sea of black robes and square caps where Zora sat with her fellow graduates. As the ceremony progressed, William found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. He remembered Zora as a child, dismantling household appliances to see how they worked. He remembered her first science fair, her determination to understand the world at its most fundamental level. He remembered the late-night calls during her undergraduate years, when she had questioned her abilities, her place in the competitive world of physics. And now here she was, Dr. Zora Washington, about to embark on a postdoctoral fellowship at one of the world's premier research institutions. His heart swelled with pride. The doctoral candidates were called one by one to receive their degrees. When Zora's name was announced, William and Diane rose to their feet, applauding as their daughter crossed the stage. She looked out into the crowd, found them, and smiled a smile that contained all the joy and triumph of the moment. After the main ceremony, they made their way to the physics department for the smaller, more intimate celebration. It was here that Zora would give her speech, representing her fellow doctoral graduates. The department chair, Dr. Eleanor Patel, introduced her with glowing praise. Dr. Washington's work on quantum entanglement has already been published in 3 major journals, a remarkable achievement for someone still completing her doctorate. Her thesis has been described by the committee as groundbreaking and paradigm-shifting. We are immensely proud to count her among our graduates, though we are sorry to lose her to CERN. Zora took the podium, her posture confident, her voice clear. Thank you, Dr. Patel. And thank you to the faculty, staff, and fellow students who have made these years at MIT so challenging and so rewarding. She paused, looking out at the audience. Physics is often described as the study of how the universe works, but what I've learned here goes beyond equations and experiments. I've learned that understanding requires perspective, multiple perspectives, that the observer affects the observed, that what we see depends on where we stand and what we're looking for. William watched as his daughter spoke, her words weaving together the personal and the scientific, the specific and the universal. She acknowledged the barriers she had faced as a woman of color in a field still dominated by white men, but also the mentors and allies who had helped her navigate those barriers. My father, Chief Justice William Washington, taught me that progress isn't linear, but it is real, she said, meeting his eyes across the room. It's measured in generations, in opportunities seized, in spaces claimed and held. In physics, we call this nonlinear progression, the idea that systems don't always change in predictable, straight-line ways. Sometimes there are quantum leaps. Sometimes there are setbacks, but the direction matters. As she concluded her speech to enthusiastic applause, William felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to find Professor Higgs, a tall, thin man with wire-rimmed glasses. Justice Washington, the professor said, extending his hand. I'm Richard Higgs, Your daughter mentioned you'd be here. I wanted to introduce myself and tell you how much I admired your ruling in the Westlake case. Thank you, William replied, shaking the offered hand. Though I'm surprised a physicist would take an interest in environmental law. The way you applied quantum uncertainty principles to regulatory standards was inspired, Higgs said. It acknowledged that our inability to predict exact outcomes doesn't absolve us of the responsibility to prevent harm. That's as true in physics as it is in environmental protection. They were joined by Dr. Patel, who echoed Higgs' praise and added her own. Your daughter is exceptional, Justice Washington. Her work bridges theoretical concepts and practical applications in ways we rarely see in someone so early in their career. She gets her intelligence from her mother, William said, nodding toward Diane, who was deep in conversation with another faculty member. And her wisdom from her father, I suspect, Dr. Patel replied with a smile. She mentioned your influence in her approach to problem-solving, looking at challenges from multiple angles, considering the long-term implications of short-term decisions. The parallels between law and physics are more numerous than I realized, William observed. Both seek to understand the rules that govern our world, Higgs agreed, though physicists have the advantage of working with rules that don't change based on human interpretation. A significant advantage, William acknowledged with a laugh. The reception continued around them, a celebration of achievement and potential. William watched as Zora moved through the crowd, confident and poised, accepting congratulations and engaging in animated discussions with professors and peers. She had found her place in this world, claimed her seat at this table. Later, as they were leaving the reception, William's phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from Tyler Kensington. Justice Washington, thank you for taking the time to speak with me yesterday. Our conversation meant more than you know. Your advice about finding my people and remembering that I earned my place here has already helped me approach my studies with renewed confidence. I've looked into the summer internship program at your court and will definitely be applying. In the meantime, I was wondering if you might be willing to recommend some readings on constitutional interpretation. My professor takes a strictly originalist approach, and I'd like to explore other perspectives. Respectfully, Tyler Kensington. William smiled and showed the email to Diane. Another mentee? She asked, knowing the answer. He has potential, William replied. You and your strays, Diane said affectionately. Some things never change. Some things shouldn't, William said. That evening, they took Zora to dinner at an upscale restaurant in Boston to celebrate her achievement. The maitre led them to a prime table by the window with a view of the Charles River. William noticed the subtle double-take as the man realized the reservation for Dr. Washington belonged to the young black woman in their party, not to either of her parents. Zora noticed it too, exchanging a knowing glance with her father. It was a small moment, barely perceptible, but it was part of the same pattern they had discussed that morning, the constant recalibration of expectations, the silent negotiations of space and respect. But tonight was for celebration, not confrontation. They ordered champagne, toasted Zora's achievement, and shared a meal filled with laughter and plans for the future. Zora spoke of her upcoming move to Geneva, of the research she would be conducting at CERN, of the colleagues she would be joining. They're doing fascinating work on quantum computing applications, she explained. The potential implications for everything from medicine to climate modeling are enormous. And you'll be at the forefront of it, Diane said proudly. One small part of a very large team, Zora corrected. But yes, it's exciting to be involved. As they finished dessert, William raised his glass for a final toast. To Dr. Zora Washington, he said, "May your discoveries illuminate the universe, and your presence in it change it for the better." "Here, here," Diane added, raising her own glass. Zora smiled, her eyes bright with emotion. "Thank you both for everything." They walked back to Zora's apartment through the warm May evening, the streets of Cambridge alive with the energy of graduation weekend. William walked between his ex-wife and his daughter, feeling a profound sense of contentment. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring for him in his courtroom, for Diane in her dean's office, for Zora in her laboratory tonight, they were simply a family, celebrating a milestone together. Back at the apartment, as Diane helped Zora pack for her upcoming move to Switzerland, William responded to Tyler's email, recommending several books and articles on constitutional interpretation. He ended with a personal note. "Remember that the law, like any human institution, reflects the perspectives of those who create and interpret it. The challenge for each new generation of legal minds is to expand those perspectives, to make the law more just, more inclusive, more reflective of our highest ideals rather than our historical limitations. I look forward to receiving your internship application. Sincerely, William Washington." He sent the email, then turned his attention to another message that had arrived during dinner, this one from Captain Sarah Chen. "Justice Washington, I wanted to update you on the situation we discussed yesterday. Our corporate team was impressed with the Diversity and Inclusion Institute you recommended. They've arranged for a comprehensive training program to be implemented across all flight crews, starting next month. Mr. Whitfield has volunteered to be among the first participants. His recognition of his actions and willingness to learn from them has been noted positively by management. On a personal note, I appreciate your measured response to what could have been a much more contentious situation. Your suggestion of education rather than punishment reflects a wisdom I hope to emulate in my own leadership. Safe travels, Captain Sarah Chen." William smiled at the message. Another small victory in the ongoing work of Justicino, the dramatic kind that made headlines, but the quiet kind that changed minds and systems one interaction at a time. He replied briefly, thanking Captain Chen for the update and expressing his hope that the training program would be effective. Then he closed his phone and joined Diane and Zora in the living room, where they were looking through old family photos and laughing at memories. "Dad, remember this?" Zora held up a picture of herself at about 10 years old, standing proudly next to a science fair project on electromagnetic fields. "My first blue ribbon." "I remember," William said, taking the photo. "You were so nervous the night before, convinced that your project wasn't good enough, and then you won first place." "Because you stayed up all night helping me practice my presentation," Zora said, "even though you had court the next day." "Worth every minute of lost sleep," William replied. They continued through the photos: Zora's high school graduation, her undergraduate years at Caltech, family vacations, holidays, the ordinary and extraordinary moments that made up a life. William found himself particularly drawn to a photo of 3 generations of Washington Menhees, grandfather, his father, and himself, taken at William's law school graduation. "I wish Grandpa and Pop could have seen you today," he said to Zora. "They did," she replied softly. "Through you." The next morning, they accompanied Zora to the airport for her flight back to Chicago, where she would spend a few weeks before moving to Geneva. The terminal was crowded with post-graduation travelers, families saying goodbye to students, tourists beginning summer vacations. As they approached the security checkpoint, William felt a familiar tension, the subtle awareness of being watched, assessed, categorized. It was the same tension he had felt countless times before, in countless similar spaces. But today, With his daughter's achievement fresh in his mind, it seemed less significant, less worthy of his energy. "Text us when you land," Diane was saying to Zora, embracing her tightly. "I will," Zora promised, "and I'll call once I'm settled in Geneva." William hugged his daughter next, holding her close. "I'm so proud of you," he said, "not just for what you've achieved, but for who you are." "I learned from the best," Zora replied, her voice muffled against his shoulder. As she pulled away, William noticed a familiar face approaching Bradley Whitfield in his airline uniform, clearly on his way to work. The young flight attendant hesitated when he saw William, then squared his shoulders and walked over. "Justice Washington," he said, his voice steady. "I didn't expect to see you again so soon." "Mr. Whitfield," William replied with a nod. Bradley turned to Zora and Diane. "You must be Dr. Washington and Dean Washington. I'm Bradley Whitfield. I was the flight attendant on Justice Washington's flight yesterday." Zora's expression cooled. "Yes, my father mentioned you." Bradley swallowed visibly. "I wanted to apologize in person. My behavior was inexcusable, and I'm deeply sorry for how I treated your father." Diane studied him with the sharp assessment that had made her a formidable attorney. "Apologies are easy, Mr. Whitfield. Change is harder." "Yes, ma'am," Bradley agreed. "That's why I've enrolled in the training program Justice Washington recommended. I want to do better." William watched the interaction with interest. Bradley could have avoided them, could have pretended not to see them, could have spared himself this uncomfortable confrontation. The fact that he had chosen to approach them, to face Zora and Diane's understandable skepticism, suggested a genuine commitment to growth. "That's a good start," William said. "The program is excellent, but as I mentioned in my email, the real work happens in daily interactions." "I understand," Bradley said. "That's actually why I wanted to speak with you again. I've been thinking about what you said about how firing one flight attendant doesn't fix a culture. I want to be part of fixing the culture, not just avoiding personal consequences." Zora's expression softened slightly. "How do you plan to do that?" "I'm not entirely sure yet," Bradley admitted. "But I've started by speaking up when I see similar behavior from colleagues, and I've volunteered to help develop new training materials based on real scenarios we encounter." "Including what happened with my father?" Zora asked. Bradley nodded. "If he's comfortable with that, I think it could be a powerful teaching example." William considered the request. "I'd want to review the materials before they're used," he said. "But yes, I'm open to it." "Thank you," Bradley said. "I should let you get back to your goodbyes. I just wanted to express my apologies in person." As Bradley walked away, Zora turned to her father. "You were right about him. He seems sincere." "People can surprise you," William said. "Not always, but sometimes." They said their final goodbyes, and Zora headed through security, turning back once to wave before disappearing into the crowd of travelers. William and Diane watched until she was out of sight, then made their way back to the rental car. "She's going to be fine," Diane said, as they drove away from the airport. "More than fine," William agreed. "She's going to be extraordinary." "She already is," Diane said. "And so much of that is because of you, William, the way you've taught her to navigate the world with dignity and purpose." "And because of you," William countered, "your fierce determination, your refusal to accept limitations." They shared a smile, the kind that acknowledged their shared history, their continued connection through their daughter despite the end of their marriage. "When's your flight back to San Francisco?" William asked. "Tomorrow morning," Diane replied. "I have a faculty meeting on Monday that I can't miss. You?" "This evening. I have court on Monday as well." The Henderson housing discrimination case, right? Diane asked. Zora mentioned you were working on it. William nodded. It's an important one. The landlord used an algorithm to screen tenants, claiming it was objective. But the algorithm consistently rejected Black and Hispanic applicants with identical financial profiles to white applicants who were accepted. Algorithmic bias, Diane said. Zora's humankind in digital form. Exactly. The lower court ruled that without explicit discriminatory intent, there was no violation of fair housing laws. We're reviewing that decision. And how will you rule? Diane asked, though she likely already knew the answer. I haven't heard oral arguments yet, William replied with a small smile. But I'm inclined to believe that impact matters more than intent when it comes to discrimination. A system that consistently produces biased outcomes is a biased system, regardless of whether its creators intended that bias. The William Washington approach to justice, Diane said, looking at the forest, not just the trees. I learned it from a brilliant civil rights attorney I knew in law school. William said, glancing at her. She taught me that justice isn't just about following rules, it's about ensuring the rules serve their intended purpose. She sounds wise beyond her years, Diane replied with a laugh. They spent the rest of the day exploring Boston, revisiting places they had enjoyed during their law school years. They walked the Freedom Trail, had lunch in the North End, and strolled through the public garden. It was a day out of time, a pause between the celebration of yesterday and the return to their separate lives tomorrow. As evening approached, William checked his watch. I should head to the airport soon. I'll drop you off, Diane offered. At the terminal, they said goodbye with the easy affection of old friends. Give Zora my love when she gets to Chicago, Diane said. I will, William promised, and good luck with your faculty meeting. Thanks, and good luck with Henderson. Make the right decision. William smiled. Don't I always? Usually, Diane conceded. That's why they made you Chief Justice. They embraced briefly. Then William headed into the terminal, rolling his small suitcase behind him. The security line was long, but moved efficiently. As he waited, he found himself observing the TSA agents, noting the subtle differences in how they interacted with different passengers. Some received cursory glances, others more thorough scrutiny. The patterns were familiar, predictable. When it was his turn, William placed his items in the bin: shoes, belt, briefcase, phone. The agent looked at his boarding pass, then at him, the same momentary calculation he had observed yesterday. Have a good flight, sir, the agent said, his tone neutral. Thank you, William replied. As he collected his belongings on the other side of the scanner, he noticed a young black woman being pulled aside for additional screening. Her expression was carefully blank, but William recognized the controlled tension in her posture, the deliberate calm in her responses to the agent's questions. He hesitated, then approached. "Excuse me," he said to the TSA agent. "Is there a problem here?" The agent looked up, surprised. "Sir, please continue to your gate. This is a routine screening." "I see," Williams said. "And how many passengers have received this routine screening today?" The young woman glanced at him, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "It's okay," she said quietly. "I'm used to it." "You shouldn't have to be," William replied, then turned back to the agent. "I'm Chief Justice William Washington of the Illinois Supreme Court. I'd like to speak with your supervisor about your screening selection process." The agent's demeanor changed immediately. "That won't be necessary, sir. We're just following protocol." "I'd still like to speak with your supervisor," William insisted calmly. A few minutes later, a TSA supervisor arrived, apologized for any inconvenience, and cleared the young woman to proceed to her gate. As they walked away from the checkpoint together, she turned to William. "Thank you," she said. "I'm Dr. Amara Johnson. I was just returning from a medical conference." "William Washington," he replied, shaking her hand. "Where are you headed?" "Chicago," Dr. Johnson said. "I'm a surgeon at Northwestern Memorial." "That's my flight as well," William noted. "And my hometown." They continued toward the gate, discussing Chicago, their respective professions, the tedium of airport security. It was a pleasant conversation between colleagues, but underneath ran the current of shared experience, the understanding of what it meant to excel in spaces not designed for you, to face constant small challenges to your belonging. "My daughter just completed her doctorate in physics at MIT, William mentioned as they waited to board. "She's heading to CERN for her postdoc." "Impressive," Dr. Johnson said. "It's not easy being a black woman in STEM. I was the only one in my surgical residency program." "She's mentioned similar experiences," William agreed. "But she's found good mentors, built a strong support network." "Essential survival skills," Dr. Johnson nodded, "along with a thick skin and a clear sense of purpose." When their flight was called, they boarded together. William was in first class again, Dr. Johnson in economy. As they prepared to part ways at the cabin divider, William handed her his card. "If you're ever interested in speaking to law students about medical ethics or health policy, let me know. My court runs a lecture series for our interns." Dr. Johnson accepted the card with a smile. "I'd like that. Thank you, Justice Washington." As William settled into his seat 2A again, by coincidence or algorithm, he reflected on the day's interactions. Bradley Whitfield's apology, Tyler Kensington's email, Amara Johnson's quiet dignity in the face of routine screening. Each person navigating the same complex social terrain from different positions, with different tools, toward different goals. The flight attendant approached not Bradley this time, but an older black woman with a warm smile. "Good evening, sir. Welcome aboard. Can I get you a pre-flight beverage?" "Sparkling water, please," William replied. "Coming right up," she said, then paused. "Excuse me, but are you Justice Washington?" William nodded, surprised to be recognized. "I thought so," she continued. "My brother is a bailiff at the Cook County Courthouse. He speaks very highly of you." "Please give him my regards," William said. "I will. He'll be thrilled." She moved on to the next passenger, returning moments later with William's sparkling water. The flight to Chicago was uneventful. William spent most of it reviewing notes for the Henderson case, preparing for Monday's oral arguments. The complexities of algorithmic bias and housing discrimination required careful consideration, the intersection of technology, law, and deeply rooted social patterns. As the plane began its descent into O'Hare, William put away his notes and looked out the window at the city spread below. Chicago, with all its contradictions, its beauty and its segregation, its opportunities and its inequities. The city where his grandfather had cleaned courtrooms, where his father had delivered mail, where he now presided over the state's highest court. Progress wasn't linear, but it was real. The plane landed smoothly, taxiing to the gate with the efficient precision of a major hub airport. As passengers prepared to deplane, William gathered his belongings and made his way into the terminal. He was halfway to baggage claim when he heard someone call his name. "Justice Washington." He turned to see Dr. Johnson hurrying to catch up with him. "Dr. Johnson," he greeted her. "How was your flight?" "Fine," she said. "But I wanted to catch you before you left. I've been thinking about your court's lecture series. I'd definitely be interested in participating." "Excellent," William replied. "My clerk will contact you to arrange the details." "Thank you. And thank you again for earlier. It meant a lot, having someone step up like that." William nodded. "We all need allies in unexpected moments." They exchanged a few more words, then parted ways, Dr. Johnson to her waiting Uber, William to the parking garage where his car waited. As he drove home through the familiar streets of Chicago, William found himself thinking about the weekend's events, about the various intersections of prejudice and possibility he had witnessed. Bradley Whitfield, confronting his biases. Diana Kensington, reconsidering her assumptions. Tyler, finding his footing at Harvard. Dr. Johnson, navigating routine screenings with practiced dignity. Zora, claiming her place in the world of theoretical physics. Each story connected to the others through the invisible threads of a society still wrestling with its contradictions. And his own role in these stories, sometimes as the subject of bias, sometimes as the challenger of systems, always as someone trying to bend the arc of the moral universe toward justice through daily choices and actions. William arrived at his home in Hyde Park, a stately brownstone near the University of Chicago. As he unlocked the door, his phone buzzed with a text from Zora. "Landed in Chicago. All good. Love you, Dad." He smiled and replied, "Welcome home. Dinner tomorrow? Love you too." Inside, he set down his briefcase and suitcase, moving through the familiar rooms with a sense of homecoming. The house was quiet, filled with books and art collected over decades, with photographs of family and friends, with the comfortable solitude of a life well lived. William made himself a cup of tea and settled into his favorite chair in the study. On the desk nearby lay the briefs from Monday's Henderson case, waiting for his final review. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of reflection, of gratitude for the weekend's experiences, both challenging and joyful. His grandfather's pocket watch sat on the side table, still keeping perfect time after all these years. Beside it, he placed Zora's graduation gift, the new watch with its hopeful inscription, "Time moves forward, but justice is timeless." In the quiet of his study, with the weight of tomorrow's decisions still hours away, William Washington closed his eyes and listened to the steady tick of both watches sewn from the past, one for the future, both marking the same present moment with their rhythmic reminder that time moves only forward, carrying with it the accumulated weight of all our choices, all our stands, all our silent victories and public defeats. Progress wasn't linear, but it was real. Measured not in grand gestures, but in small moments of recognition, in seats claimed and held, in the slow, steady work of justice, one flight, one case, one mind at a time. 3 months later, William Washington sat in his chambers in the Illinois Supreme Court building, reviewing briefs for an upcoming case. The room was quiet, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the polished wood floor. On his desk sat a framed photo of Zora at her MIT graduation, her smile radiant as she held her diploma. A knock at the door interrupted his concentration. His clerk, Amina Okafor, entered with a stack of files. "The briefs for the Ramirez case, Justice Washington," she said, placing them on his desk. "And you have a visitor. He doesn't have an appointment, but he was quite insistent." William looked up. "Who is it?" "A flight attendant named Bradley Whitfield." William set down his pen, surprised. "Send him in." Bradley entered the chambers nervously, his uniform replaced by a button-down shirt and khakis. He stood awkwardly until William gestured to a chair. "Mr. Whitfield, this is unexpected." "Thank you for seeing me, Justice Washington," Bradley said, perching on the edge of the chair. I wanted to apologize in person for what happened on that flight to Boston. William studied the young man. That was 3 months ago. I know. It's taken me that long to work up the courage. Bradley paused. After that flight, I was put on administrative leave. The airline enrolled me in their new training program, the one you recommended to Captain Chen. I see. It was eye-opening. We had to examine our own biases, look at data about how often system errors affected certain passengers more than others. Bradley met William's gaze directly for the first time. I didn't think I was prejudiced. I have black friends. My college roommate was black. But the training made me see patterns in my own behavior I'd never noticed. William nodded but remained silent, allowing Bradley to continue. The thing is, I grew up in a small town in Iowa. My high school had 2 black students. My church, none. I thought I was open-minded because I watched the right shows and said the right things. But when it came to that moment on the plane, I made a split-second judgment about who belonged in first class. And who did you think belonged there? William asked quietly. Bradley looked down. People who looked like my idea of success, which, I realized during training, was almost exclusively white. Awareness is the first step, William said. What comes next is harder. Action, Bradley replied. Changing behavior, not just thoughts. That's why I'm here. I wanted you to know that I'm trying to do better. That your response recommending education instead of punishment made a difference. William leaned back in his chair. Mr. Whitfield, may I ask you something? Of course. What would you do differently if you could relive that moment on the plane? Bradley considered the question carefully. I would check the manifest first, before making any assumptions. I would address you with the same respect I gave to other first-class passengers. And if there had been an actual seating issue, I would have explained it transparently and offered options, not demands. Simple changes, William observed, but significant ones. Yes, Bradley agreed. The training taught us that bias often operates in those small, seemingly insignificant moments, a different tone of voice, an extra verification step. A presumption of belonging versus a presumption of error. William nodded, impressed by the young man's reflection. And how has this affected your work since returning to flights? I'm more conscious of my interactions with all passengers, Bradley said. I've caught myself making assumptions and corrected course, and I've spoken up when I've seen colleagues doing the same. That last part takes courage, William noted. It does. Not everyone is receptive, but the airline has been supportive of the changes. Captain Chen has been particularly helpful. She's become something of a mentor. William smiled. She struck me as someone who understands leadership. She does, Bradley confirmed. She's recommended me for a management training program, says I have potential if I can learn from my mistakes. A wise assessment, William said. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a business card. If you're serious about continuing this journey, there's a program at the University of Chicago Law School on bias in public service. They offer weekend workshops for professionals outside the legal field. Bradley accepted the card. Thank you. I'll look into it. As Bradley prepared to leave, he hesitated at the door. Your daughter's graduation, did you make it on time? I did, William said, glancing at the photo on his desk. She's working at CERN now, in Switzerland. That's impressive, Bradley said. She must be very smart. She is, and very forgiving of her old dad who still mixes up quarks and leptons. Bradley smiled. Well, thank you for your time, Justice Washington, and for your grace that day on the plane. It would have been easy and justified to demand my termination. People can change, Mr. Whitfield. Systems can too, with enough pressure in the right places. After Bradley left, William turned to the window overlooking the Chicago skyline. The city stretched before him, a complex tapestry of lives and stories, of prejudices and possibilities. He thought about Bradley Whitfield and his journey from unexamined bias to active awareness. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but perhaps not an insignificant one. His intercom buzzed. "Justice Washington, Tyler Kensington is here for his internship orientation." "Send him in," William replied. Tyler entered the chambers with the confident stride of someone who had found his footing. 3 months of law school had changed him, his posture straighter, his handshake firmer, his eyes meeting William's directly. "Justice Washington, thank you again for this opportunity," he said. "You earned it," William replied. "Your application essay on judicial restraint versus judicial activism."